The idea of self-publishing is a very intriguing one, but wouldn't you like to actually hear from an author who's done it themselves, both the pros and the cons of it, so that you really get an idea of what it's like? Well, today I have my friend Emily Conrad with us so that she can share her experience of self-publishing. How many novels is it now?
I've self-published 4 novels and 1 novella.
4 novels and 1 novella. So this woman knows what she's talking about. She has experienced some successes, some challenges, and she is willing to share it all with us today. Well, welcome, Emily. I really appreciate you being here with us to share with us all your knowledge.
Well, thank you, Rachel. Yeah, it's a learning process for me too. So, but yeah, I've published a couple, and I'm happy to share what I've learned so far and where I hope to go in the future. So
Great. I've got so many questions for you. We're going to get that into that in a minute, but I just wanted to give people a little bit of a more idea of who you are. And so I'm going to read your bio real quick here, but I don't want to miss anything. So, Emily writes contemporary Christian romance that explores life's relevant questions. Though she likes to think some of her characters are pretty great, the ultimate hero of her stories, including the one she's living, is Jesus. She lives in Wisconsin with her husband and their energetic coonhound rescue. She is the author of the standalone novel Justice and the Rhythms of Redemption romance series, as well as a series of short stories, which she emails in installments to subscribers. You can learn more about her and her books at emilyconradauthor.com. And at the end, I'll definitely make sure to ask you where people can connect with you and buy your books.
sure, sounds good.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for being here with us. Um, I would love for you to start with how you even got to this point where you have so many novels and a novella in print where somebody could pick it up and read it. Like, how did you even get here? What started this writing journey for you?
Sure. Well, it started when I was just a kid. I loved writing stories. And that that love really started in middle school and took off from there. And I was consistently writing short stories, and the stories through high school got longer and longer and longer. So that by college age, they were turning out to be novel length. I was having trouble finishing a novel, but I eventually did. And sometime around there, I became aware of ACFW, which is American Christian Fiction Writers, and entered their contest and started getting more feedback. At the time, I was writing YA because I had started writing as a young adult myself. So it just kind of made sense to me. And I wanted to write stories that provided hope in the YA market, because a lot of what I was reading, I wasn't very aware of Christian fiction at that point.
Okay.
And I wanted some kind of to offer a different kind of hope than what I was seeing in the stories that were out there. Thanks to feedback from ACFW. And then I got a professional critique. And after that, my querying of agents went much better. And in 2010, I signed with my first agent for a YA manuscript that made it to a pub board. So that's, where they're making decisions. Are we going to publish this? Are we not? So it's kind of the last step there, but it didn't get picked up. So it was time to move on to a different project.
So how
And
did you make that decision to move on?
well, it had been rejected. Like we were
Yeah.
kind of through our options for that.
Okay.
So my agent had a few publishers that she was trying to sell it to, and she was a good agent, well established, and generally speaking, they'll sell to the larger, like the big 5 publishers. And so we had she was feeling that there wasn't a lot of space for YA manuscripts. We didn't have a lot of options for people that we could propose this to. So we had been through those and what she felt were the good options for the book. And because of how small Christian YA was, how niche,
And it still is.
and it still is. And
Yeah.
I'm not trying to discourage anyone from that, because I still believe very strongly, that teenagers need hope.
Oh, they do.
More than the rest of us, right? Or at least as much as the rest of us. They need hope. And I'm a strong believer in fiction that provides that. So, but for me, what my agent was recommending was that I start writing for adults.
Okay.
So at that point, there was a little bit of an adjustment period, like getting my feet under me, trying to figure out what I was going to write next.
Were
And
you welcoming to that? Or were you like, I like young, like I like young adult fiction. Like I don't want to do like was there
yeah,
resistance in your soul at
a
all?
little bit. I was intrigued by it. I liked the idea that there was more opportunity.
Mm,
I felt unqualified. I was a
okay.
pretty young adult myself at that point, and now I'm thinking like, well, this was 2010, so how old was I? Um, I was, I was probably around the age that my characters would be then. I don't.
Mhm.
It was a mindset change.
Yeah.
Right now I'm dealing with something similar in that I am trying to write characters in a different age group,
Hmm.
and so they're early 50s, and I'm like, I just need to make sure that I have their thought processes right because I don't
Right.
want to misrepresent this.
Hmm.
So switching to writing, there was an intimidation factor for sure. And my agent and I had a hard time landing on what my next idea should be. Ideas have always been the hard part for me.
Mm.
Um, Ultimately, we ended up parting ways, and I think that was in part I was a young writer and I didn't have a lot of experience, and I was having trouble coming up with another good idea. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Hmm.
and so I think I needed some time to regroup, and so that's what I ended up doing.
I can imagine like you pour your heart and soul into this one story idea and you like want it to succeed so badly. And then to have to, one, grieve the fact that it's not going to succeed and then have to change gears into something you don't feel qualified to write. Like there's got to be a little bit of adjustment period that you're going to go through.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, it was early on, and like I said, ideas are the hard part for me. So like coming up with these new ideas and they just weren't. And I think even as a person, I think I just, I had more to learn and more to grow, which is unfortunate, and nobody likes to hear that, and I would have
No.
been probably offended to hear that back then. you know and I have more to learn and grow now too, which that's I can be a perfectionist, and that's hard, but we have to um do you we can let that get in the way of the
Mhm.
progress then,
Yeah.
and getting the feedback that we need, and adjusting to the new ideas of like, well, it could, like, this way you can do it this way, but what if you did it this way, and maybe that's where success will be for you, like maybe that's
Mhm.
the direction. So trying to learn to be flexible and go with it. um so I At that point I wrote Justice. I was my agent. I would say one last gift she gave me was, as we were trying to come up with ideas that I could write about, she suggested, like, what about a modern day fairy tale retelling? Like something where, like,
Yeah.
because coming up with a new idea, was hard for me. Like,
Right.
what about taking an old idea and making it new? Like, would
Mm.
that
Yeah, that makes
help?
sense.
So, around that same time, I heard Liz Curtis Higgs speak,
Mhm.
and she has these stories where she kind of did that. I
She's the one with
read,
the about the women of the Bible, right? Like the bad women of the Bible?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so she has a book called Unveiling Mary Magdalene.
Okay.
And so in it, it's like half nonfiction and half fiction. So she's
Mm.
got like the study on Mary Magdalene and what we know from her from scripture. And then she had this modern day story of a woman and a pastor and the way they were interacting. And it was taking some of that inspiration from the biblical account and setting it in the modern day. And I
Oh, that's cool.
really, really loved that idea. And so that is what I ended up doing with Justice, which ended up being my debut novel. Um, so after I had that written, I did find another agent. We sold the book to a small press, and that came out in 2018.
Okay.
So I signed the contract in 2016.
So it took the 2 years to get
It
out.
took a long
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
and a lot of that time
I was gonna say, did you but you probably had the novel already completed, right? Because typically they ask you. So what
yeah,
did you do for those 2 years?
that's that's what happened next. I started writing about rock stars. Um, I was feeling a little bit disillusioned. So Um, like I said, 2010, I believe, is when I signed with my first agent. So we're already years in the
Yeah,
future.
you're like 8 years down the road.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that I signed that contract in 2016.
Mhm.
Um, there were some unknowns at that point. I didn't realize the book wouldn't come out until 2018.
Mm.
I found out my launch date was March of 2018, but I didn't find that out until maybe October of 2017.
Whoa.
So that whole
Okay.
time, and I mean, that's some
Yeah.
communication issues in there, like that's a little bit of the experience that I had with the small press. But during that time, I was writing other stories and I was feeling a little disillusioned and a little discouraged. And let's see, I'm trying to think of how this all happened because I did write a couple other contemporary manuscripts between Justice and the Rockstar books, which are the ones that I've self-published.
When you
But
got that when you got that contract, did you feel like the ideas were starting to come? Like, did it like open up the floodgates that like almost like validation, like, oh, somebody, or
by
did it
that
or just like it
point,
just was that you needed to write?
well, I'm trying to think of the timeline here. Before I even sold Justice, I think I had at least one, maybe two other manuscripts written.
Okay.
Um, and I have since decided that those manuscripts were pretty much just for me.
Yeah.
And
I have a
working
couple of those too.
through, yeah, but just working through some questions I had. Like my bio says I like to work through life's relevant questions, but I think writing for entertainment and writing to work through some of your questions, and sometimes that overlaps, and sometimes
Mhm.
you end up with a book that you're like, you know what, this one was for me.
Yeah.
Or with one of them it was like it's a good story, but I can see some things that would be problematic if I tried to publish it, or that
Mhm.
it just aren't falling into place and I'm not sure that I can go through and fix those.
Right.
um so I've got a couple of those in there because I finished writing Justice in 2014,
Okay.
and then sold it in 2016, and I was writing about a book a year. So
Mhm.
I had two other books in the middle there. And after we sold Justice, I was talking with my agent about trying to go on to selling the next book or how we were going to go about that. But while I was waiting to see how things played out with the small press, feeling a little disillusioned, I started working on some books that brought me joy and made me
Mhm.
happy. And I got this goofy smile, and I felt self conscious because I wanted to write serious fiction,
I
um,
know. I had that feeling in college because I studied creative writing, and I just remember being in class with these like really, like you're saying, like serious writers, really literary type
mhm,
creative writers, and I'm over here with my like more, pop culture
yeah,
self, and I'm like, "Oh, I feel like I'm like a fraud."
yeah, not a fraud at all. Different
No.
audience.
No.
Um, yeah, and so yeah, I felt some of that too. I studied creative writing in college, in that was my minor, so it wasn't
Mhm.
like I was totally immersed in a master's program or anything like that. But I
Yeah.
did do some short story classes and poetry classes and things like that. So I
Right.
I get it, and maybe that's where part of that comes from. Seeing
Probably.
like what type of work the people around you are praising.
Mhm. Yep.
So
And what kind of
I
works are being studied
yeah
too in the
yeah
classes, right? Like, you're not pulling Harry Potter off the shelves and and
yeah
reading it for, even though there's a lot to learn from, that you
yeah
can learn about storytelling in Harry Potter.
yeah
Obviously,
absolutely. I
if
mean,
she didn't know how to tell a story, it wouldn't have done as well as it did.
exactly. Yeah. There's something to be said for the stories that many people pick up and that many
Mhm.
people talk about and are excited about,
Exactly.
even for years. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's something to be said for that. And a lot of the classics today were the popular books of their day too. So
Exactly.
yeah. Yeah.
Exactly.
So I kind of fell in love with these, and
With these rock stars
with the rock stars. I was still
and the
doing the
women that
same.
they love.
Yeah. I was still doing the same thing in that I was taking biblical accounts and kind of
Mhm.
being like, what might a modern day parallel be like? So you asked if that, like, if after the first one the floodgates kind of opened, and I don't know that they did, but it did give me a little bit of a scaffolding to like start building things
Okay.
on. So I had David and Bathsheba in mind when I wrote the first one.
Well, I would think too, like, if you are under a contract with one, you're thinking, "Oh, I'm going to be able to get another contract. Like, this is the trajectory I'm on, and so I need to have something ready for when they come to me."
Yeah, I decided that I didn't want to continue working with a small press.
Mhm.
So for me, it wasn't so much that as it was like, what's next for my career.
Yes. Okay.
But yeah, I have a lot of friends who have multiple book contracts or who are
Mhm.
trying to get more contracts with a traditional publisher, and they do very much have to be ready to, like, when the
Right.
one book comes out, it's time to be proposing the next book and having
Mhm.
something new to offer, and trying to make sure it's written well enough in advance that you don't have to like scramble to meet a deadline.
Right. Right.
So that is definitely part of the traditional publishing mindset that you have to keep in mind. Yeah.
So you had you you at this point when the book's coming out, you had it in your head that you probably weren't gonna work with a small press, but you had these stories that were starting to play in your mind. What were
Mhm.
your next steps? Like, where did you move from there?
Well, I kind of struck out on my own again. So what I tried to do was just the same, um, because by this point it was 2018 or so, maybe yeah, probably 2018 or 2019. And I was I was ready to pursue the Rockstar books, the Rhythms of Redemption romances. And I kind of went back to the drawing board. I had been pursuing traditional publishing this whole time, and that was still my preference.
Mhm.
So I went back to the drawing board with pitching to agents.
Okay. So you had an agent, so you decided to not work with that one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I mean,
I
it's,
know, is it you don't wanna say anything bad, but, like, they're at the end of the day, it's a working relationship, and sometimes they gel and sometimes they don't, right?
yep. Yep.
And you have to just make that professional decision, "This isn't the right person for me to work with to further my career."
Yep.
And so you just have to make that decision, and it's nothing really personal per se, it's just a business decision that you're making.
Very well said. Thank you for that.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
And there are people I talked to people who worked with my agent, who enjoyed working with, and it worked well for them.
Mhm,
And same for, I have friends who are still publishing books with that publisher, and they're enjoying the experience
mhm,
and what they have to offer. And so yeah, it's a personal decision about, the vision that you have, or your specific goals to your career. Yeah.
mhm.
So I went to ACFW pitching my work again. And meeting with agents, and had a few request fulls and take a look at it, and ultimately one after the other. Well, that makes it sound quick. It was a very slow process. I was getting no's,
Okay.
and some of them were close, but for whatever reason they decided to
What were
go.
some of the reasons they gave you?
I think one of them said that it was similar to something one of their other
Mhm.
clients had. So then it would be like a
Yeah,
conflict of interest,
yeah.
right? Which one do they pitch to a publisher?
Mhm,
Um, yeah, and a lot of them didn't give like a very specific reason. A lot of them were positive, this is good writing, or
mhm.
this is very polished. Um, yeah, so it there was the one I think who talked about, but otherwise it was just, I don't feel it's a right fit, which is kind of what we were saying with the
Yeah,
decision
true.
to,
Yep, it goes
like,
both ways. Yep.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so around that time, I had one connection at a publisher, and that publisher decided to consider the manuscript even though I was unagented. And I
Okay.
really appreciated that shot
Yeah.
at it.
Yeah.
So that was a good shot. And that's another thing for aspiring writers who are pitching their work. You can go to conferences like ACFW, you can pitch directly to editors. They may look at your manuscript even if you're not agented.
Right.
It would need to be completed. It would need to be, to get serious consideration, it would obviously have to be polished.
Right. You have
Um,
to know what you're pitching to them. You have to be
yeah.
You have to be sure of the project that you're asking them to partner with you in.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there are opportunities to go directly to publishers. So I did have that connection with one and was able to pitch it. Around that time, I started working for an organization called Hope Writers, which is how you and I met.
Right.
And I was figuring out a lot of things for how to run different aspects of, my job responsibilities there. I was in charge
Mhm.
of messaging. So that would be anything from automated messaging on Facebook to eventually included emails, but text messages and all these things. And I was
Okay.
figuring out a lot of how to do that sort of thing.
Okay.
And I was like, if I can figure things out for Hope Writers and I can learn all these different things that I had a background in internet customer service,
Okay.
but not in the specific stuff. And so I
Not in
was
the whole online marketing area of
yeah,
things.
the direct messaging.
Okay.
Like learning like what are the laws for sending text messages?
Yeah.
And how do we comply with those
Mhm.
and still get the message out and try not to be spammy, try to be
Right.
relational. And
Mhm.
I was learning all of that for Hope Writers, and the Hope Writers team is incredibly encouraging and positive, and they very much have a can-do mindset,
Mhm.
like um I think on their hiring page, I think they still say like we're a small but mighty team. And
Mhm.
they really have that mindset. And I was like, if I can figure all of this out, I can figure out indie publishing. So by the
I love it.
time that last no came through from that publisher, I was kind of waiting to see what they said, because that would
Mhm.
have been a great route to go.
Right.
And I had always been very intimidated by all the work that goes into indie publishing.
Mhm.
Um, but when that last no came through, I felt like I was finally in a place with the resources where I could tackle this. I could do this.
Mhm.
So that's how I made that's a very long answer
But
to your question of
I
my
love
journey,
that.
but
Thank you for sharing that though, because I think that it is important for people to see that it is a long process, that there is a lot of rejection as part of it, that there are a lot of business decisions you have to make along the way, that it's not just a, okay, I've made this book now, please publish it and it gets published. There's a lot to it. And I think sometimes we think the hardest part is writing the story, and it's just one small piece of this, like, bigger thing that that we have to undertake in order to get our story into the hands of a reader. And so I think it's helpful to hear stories like yours because it reminds us that there is work that we're gonna have to put into it if we want to get it in front of somebody. And I think the point you made about that some of those novels you wrote were for you, and you're not gonna put that same effort into getting those in front of somebody because they're not for somebody else but you. But the ones that are for somebody else, you're gonna be willing to put the work into it to get it in front of somebody. But sometimes it can be a really discouraging process. So I
yeah,
do appreciate you doing that and sharing
yeah,
that.
it can be a long it can be a long process, and I've learned a little bit, like not everybody necessarily tries the traditional route first.
Right.
And so the journey looks different. And I'm also learning that some of the things that I learned pursuing traditional publishing and thinking then that that was also the way that indie publishing should work. Um, I
Yeah.
have learned like, hey, there's a different mindset with
Yeah.
indie publishing, and starting to learn those sorts of things too, so that I publish books that I am proud of, and
Mhm.
I am happy to present them to people. But I'm learning too that there's a different way to do it, or the indie mindset's a little bit different. So that's something
Mhm.
that I get to learn now too.
Can you articulate what some of those differences are?
So I went to the ACFW conference just a couple months
Mhm.
ago. So some of this is kind of a newer realization for me, but I got to talk with some indies who are successful at it and who are just doing things a little bit differently. So coming from the traditional background, I don't think it'll surprise people to hear that sometimes indie books have a little bit of a hurdle to overcome in people's minds, especially if they're from a traditional publishing background.
Yep.
Um, Indie publishing can have this stigma attached to it that like these books are not the same quality as the traditionally published books.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that because, our mutual friend Tara, She went to the conference with you, or well, you were at the
Yeah,
same conference,
she was super
and
helpful to me, by the way. I met her. Yeah.
I'm gonna be interviewing her too, so I'm really excited about that, but she was wearing on her name tag, it was something like qualified
Mhm.
independent publisher, and I was like, what does that mean?" And she's like, "Oh, it means I'm like I sold enough copies that I'm, like, legit in their eyes," and I'm like, "Oh my gosh," like, that just feels like such a huge, like, not slap in the face, but kinda, but it's understandable because, it's like this, like, balance between there are people who just kinda rush through the process, get something up there, and it isn't a polished project, but the what it takes to create and publish a novel independently, there is, like, this huge process to it, and if you're doing it well, just the fact that you got it, like, out there is a big accomplishment, and it should be celebrated, right?
Yeah, and to get the QIP rating, I I was so happy to talk with her because she had the QIP rating.
Mhm.
Because I have a background in traditional publishing, because I had a book come out with a small press. Um, for like some of the bigger contests and things like that, in order to enter those, you either need to have a traditionally published book under your belt or you need to be QIP.
Right.
And that's ACFW, but that's other places too. To enter the
Mhm.
Christie Award, you need to have a certain sales
Right.
track record or a traditionally published book. So I have a lot to learn about how to sell copies of books. So I will say that. And one of Tara's biggest takeaways for me was, Kindle Unlimited. And so
Yes.
that is something that I am going to be trying. But I would not be QIP, but I do have, because I have the traditional publishing background, because I have that book, I'm able to enter those contests. But indies seem to write faster.
Yes,
They
they
write
do.
shorter.
Oh, that's
They,
interesting. I didn't realize that.
well, it's easier to write faster if you're writing shorter, I
True,
think
true.
is what,
They're definitely much more prolific.
yeah. Yeah.
Definitely.
And I picked up a copy of Tara's Carol finalist. And
Okay.
I have it and it's like it is shorter than my books considerably. Like if I ran and grabbed it and like held them both
Yeah.
up, you could see the difference. And now I don't
And
know
it's
that
not like
all
your
of her
book is, like, super long either.
right. It's
It's like a typical not normal, typical length for a
yeah, they're all
novel.
in the 90,000s.
Mhm.
Which I have an editor friend who works for a traditional publisher, and it does sound as though they kind of in contemporary romance they actually expect them a little shorter, which I was
Okay.
surprised about, but I don't think every publisher thinks the same on that.
I could see
I
that.
think
I
it
could see that they
depends.
would be each a little bit I've heard somewhere between 80 to 100
Yeah.
on novels, and it really but romance typically skews a little shorter.
Yeah.
So, that makes sense.
My editor friend also says it's really easy to cut like 10,000 words. Like when we get a manuscript, it's really easy to do that. I was like,
Yeah.
okay, well,
She
but
said that this is she's sweet, it's sweet, and the writer in us is like, "What?
we're like,
Yeah,
no.
no, no,
Um,
every word is important."
yeah, but I am grateful. I do still hire an editor.
Oh, yeah.
But I've learned that there are some things that I paid more for because I was thinking I want this book to look traditionally published.
Mm,
Like I want
yeah.
it like if you hold up one and you hold up the other, I want mine to hold its ground.
Mhm.
And that was really important to me, but that meant that I ended up paying more for, say, my cover than
Yes.
maybe some of the successful indies are because they're cutting some costs there. And it's not that their covers are bad. They have good covers too.
But
So I'm
there
not
is,
trying to
like,
bash that,
but
but
n
just
it's a
maybe
business decision once again, right? Like, it's this
Mhm,
like, we have to acknowledge that that's a business decision as to, like, where are we going to put our investment into the product,
mhm,
and what is its impact on the profit that we're gaining from it? And,
mhm.
for somebody, cover might not be as important as maybe something else. And
Yeah,
so
and
they have to make a
it's
decision for that book.
yeah, it's weighing the cost
Mhm.
more so than the not that sounds bad. I designed my next cover myself,
Yeah.
which is something that I see advised never do that.
I
But I
I
did it.
designed I designed my cover for the guided journal I published last I think it's been like a year and a half now. So, yeah, about a year and a half now. So, I mean, I designed that cover, and I've actually had people say like, "Oh, it doesn't look like, self-published cover," and
Perfect.
like, there's part of me that's like, "Yay." But then I get the fact that, like, if you don't if you don't have that, like, natural skill set, you're gonna wanna hire somebody else to do it if it's important, like, if that's something that you value, like you're saying, for you, having that cover look a certain way was important to you,
Mhm.
and you felt like you needed to hire somebody to do that, and that's an okay decision. Like,
Mhm.
you are a business owner in this world, as a writer, you're also an entrepreneur, and you have to make that decision for the product that you're putting out.
Yeah. It's just it's hard to make it back. So, while I was
Yes.
talking to
Yes.
Tara, by the way, who is Tara Grace Erickson,
Yeah, I know, we're
for
like, "Just Tara,
for
Tara."
anyone, and I told Tara how much I spent on my covers, right? And so she and
Did
I
she,
were
like, fall
talking.
out of her chair?
She did not fall out of her chair. She was very nice about it, but, she's like, "Well," and she was telling me what she did for some of her covers, and they're good covers.
Yeah.
So she was telling me what she did for some of her covers, and, she's like, "There's a lot of room in between," like, because I had spent a couple $100 on each of
Yeah.
my covers, and she had spent considerably less, and even
Mhm.
just realizing, "Hey, that was possible," and I think with the traditional mindset, it was like, well, you have to spend money and you have to make sure that your product is the same.
Mhm.
Whereas with indie publishing, there can be differences and you can be
Right.
very successful at that. And it's not like one is a good book and one isn't a good book,
Mm.
but I wanted to create a product that looked the same or
Mhm.
that seemed the same. And putting all my focus on that and being willing to spend extra to have something that I felt like looked that way, um, you almost get this mindset where you're willing to spend the extra money, but as an indie, you have to consider like, what'll it take to earn that money back,
Yes. Yes.
And the covers are beautiful, and I'm
Your
not sure
covers
I
are
would trade them,
y your
because
covers are
now I know
gorgeous,
what's possible,
right?
And that gives me some ideas as I'm looking into designing future covers.
Mhm.
So if that's what it's going to take to set the tone for this is what I want an Emily Conrad book to look like,
Mhm.
um, then that's what I did. But just making decisions where it's like, well, is it possible to do like a labor swap to get something?
Mm. Yeah.
Is it what sorts of free resources are out there? Um, you know, it, just learning to do things a little bit less expensive instead of trying to be like, well, publishers spend all this money, I'm going to too, so
Right.
that it's the same. So it's a little bit
And
different and a different mindset.
yeah, so what it sounds like is that as an indie publisher, you really need to consider the cost of doing business, like the cost of making the product and really thinking about that bottom line, like what return are you going to get on the investment that you're making into this book?
Yeah.
And as a traditionally published author, you're really not considering those things because you're not the one with the burden of production costs and marketing costs, really,
Right.
because the publisher
Yeah.
takes that on.
Yeah. They take on the cost. Now I'm happy. I did talk with some indie authors and I'm happy with the way like my editing went, and I did pay for an editor, I paid for a proofreader. I had a team of volunteer proofreaders too.
That's awesome.
And I'm pretty sure yeah, typos still make it through.
They always do. I worked as an editor for a bit on a scientific journal, and it would go through rounds. Edits would go through, I want to, 4 people multiple times, and it still would have an error when it would publish. It was always so annoying. You're
Yeah.
like,
I heard a traditional author, well-established traditional author talking at ACFW about her foray into indie publishing. And, it was like, well, I paid this much for this and I paid for this and I paid for that. And I'm like thinking, that's exactly what I did.
mm,
And having talked with some successful indies, realizing like those are some places where you can cut costs in order to make this a more manageable
so
business.
cover is one.
So
What are some other areas you can cut cost? Do you remember what
I
they said?
think cover was a really big one for me.
I can believe it because I think too, like, we think the cover has to sell the book because we're
Yeah.
also thinking like the reality is we're not really in a market anymore where, like, a book is on a shelf pointed out at, you know what I mean? People still go to bookstores, but most of the time they're, browsing online, or they hear about this, or that's their favorite author, and they're gonna buy that person's book regardless of what the cover looks like, you know? So
Yeah.
I think sometimes we put a lot of emphasis on the cover and what it's gonna do for us.
Yeah. Well, and I do think some people have bought the book. I know some people have bought the books because they like the covers.
Oh, well, that's
So
good feedback.
I know that they did that.
I'll admit, I totally judge books on their cover.
Yeah. Yeah.
Completely,
So
100%.
they are important, but it's just like thinking like I can have a good cover that didn't cost $300. Like
Mm,
you can
yeah,
have a good cover without feeling like you have to spend so much to compensate for the fact that you're an indie. Do you know does that make
exactly.
sense? Like,
Yes, I love what you just said there. That's really you do not have to spend more to compensate for the fact that you are indie publisher.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really important that people hear that. It's very important because the
And it's a
inside
hard-earned lesson,
it is.
like
Well, thank you for sharing it with us so we don't have to make the same mistakes.
I think also there are a lot of free resources out there. I can think of a course that I paid, I don't know, maybe $600 for or something. And
Okay.
there was a little bit of fear of missing out. There was a little bit of this like, well, I'm an indie and I need to make sure I do this well, or
Mm,
but that's a lot of money to invest and making that back is hard.
yeah.
And there are things like your podcast and many other great podcasts that
Mhm.
can teach you a lot of the same things
Right.
without you purchasing a course that costs hundreds of dollars. And are you going to be able to make that back? I think that there are resources out there for free where I
Mhm.
could have learned the same things, and it was on
Yes.
marketing. And there are a lot of free marketing resources
Oh
out
my
there.
goodness. So
Um,
many. So many
so
great ones too.
either way, if you're going to buy a course, you're still going to spend a bunch of time learning all of
Mhm.
that. I would suggest spending the time listening to those podcasts and things and doing some research rather than, I mean, either way, you're spending time.
True.
One way you're spending a lot of money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so I wish I had taken
Valid point.
more advantage and been a little less afraid of missing out on like
Mhm.
some secret, that I was going to
Yeah.
learn. I think something you said is really important. Like, this is a business and this is a product that I'm selling.
Mhm.
And this is what my customers want from me, not this book represents me. And
Yeah.
that's a very dangerous
Yeah.
mindset because if you start putting your identity and your worth in the product instead of thinking of it as a product that you're selling to customers and this is what customers expect, if you start putting your identity there and being like, well, this is what people think of me and I don't want them to think whatever about
Yeah.
me.
True. So making
Their
making
decisions.
making decisions based off of what will further I wanna say the bottom line, right? Like, what's gonna further your business? How is
Mhm.
it gonna continue to be profitable? How are you gonna continue to serve your customer? Making decisions based off of that rather than, "What will people think of me if I make X, Y, and Z decision?"
Mhm.
And,
Yep.
like, even going back to your cover, your reader might want a really well-designed cover, a cover that looks
Yeah.
more traditionally published, right? They might care about that, and if
Yeah.
you know that about your reader and you're gonna deliver it to her, right? But if she really doesn't care, then why are you wasting the money
Yeah.
putting it into the cover if she really doesn't care about the cover? So understanding what she wants will help you make that decision about what level, kind of where Tara was saying, like, there's this here and here, and there's a wide range in between
Yeah.
the 2 things, right?
And not trying to prove something to yourself or to people who did go the traditional publishing route or to, like just trying to serve your reader.
Yeah.
Does this serve my reader? Do I need to do this to serve my reader? And I do think I love my covers. And yeah, as
Mhm.
I'm talking about this, I'll keep the covers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I can't bring myself to regret that decision. I love those covers.
No,
I
yeah,
do
you
think
should
that
not regret them, yeah.
yeah, they sold books.
Yeah.
Were they more expensive than they needed to be? That could be.
And
And
that's where you get creative, right? Like, and
yeah.
every business owner has to get creative. Like, my husband is in construction project management, and he puts a bid out to multiple contractor, right?
Mhm.
Like, he shops around for the best pricing, and that's what you gotta do as
Yeah.
a business owner. Like, we
Yeah.
get creative with the ways that we get the thing we need to make our product what we want it to be.
Yeah. And I mean, now I know how excited I can be about the right cover. And so now I will keep playing with designs. And if I hire
Yeah,
one out in the future, it's that excitement that I'll be looking for again. Cause I know if I feel it, I like pretty things, then I think
yes,
my reader will will feel it too. And so
exactly.
now I guess maybe it helps set the bar. So for that, I'm happy
Mm.
for it. But yeah, I mean, there are different ways to do things and different mindsets. Yeah.
So we've been talking a lot about being a business owner, being an entrepreneur as a writer. Has that been an easy hat to wear for you, or does it kill your like creative soul to have to think about business decisions?
It does not kill my creative soul.
Some friends of mine who are like, I'm a creative. I don't want to think about numbers. So,
Yeah, I don't mind. I think I like a little bit of that. I'm not afraid of a spreadsheet. Again, and this is part the mindset that I came into it with, right? But I put a lot of my focus on just producing the best product I possibly could this last year. So my first book came out in August of 2021, my first indie book.
mhm.
Um I've put a lot of focus on just producing the best products I could.
So
Um
you put out 4 books in 1 year?
well, so
Almost 4, right? The 4th
remember
one?
I started writing this series in 2017 and I was
Oh,
writing
that's
about a book a
right.
year.
That's right.
So
Okay.
I had most of these written before I published the
Got
first
it.
one, and
Okay.
that enabled me to publish them very quickly.
That makes
So
sense.
I will be
Okay.
slowing down. Some indies are able to write that quickly and turn it around and
Mhm.
put them out. I think what I need to do is take some time to learn a little bit more about the marketing side of things and how to sell more books. And that is definitely an area where I have a lot to learn.
Mm.
So that's just and yeah, it's just the focus I came into it with and realizing like it was helpful to hear another traditional author talking about indie publishing at the conference though, because I was like, hey, I'm not the only one who has gone into it with this mindset.
Right.
But there's a whole different approach that we can take that will result in happy readers
Right.
and success in indie publishing. And I have a lot to learn on that. So I'm excited about that. I am planning to slow down a little bit now that the last one, October 17th, is the last release date for the Rhythms of Redemption series. So once that's out, I'm kind of bridging them together, which is sort of another indie thing. So I'll have
Mhm.
carryover characters because readers invest in them and they like
They
to see
do.
how they're doing. And people keep asking me about Tim. So this will be about Tim.
I know, I'm so
Um,
excited for this one. I'm like, "Yes, give us Tim's story."
Yeah, yeah. So it should be fun. I just have to learn how to write, like I said, about characters who are older than me.
Yeah.
Again, and, and learn how to do that well. But yeah, it's just the next thing is probably switching my focus a little bit from not that obviously I don't want to lose quality.
Well, yeah,
But
no.
but learning now that I know how to put a book out there, learning how to do it in a smarter way, in a way
Mhm.
that makes more business sense. So that'll be my next project. I'll be looking forward to watching your interviews here so I can learn more too.
I'm excited. You had mentioned marketing and learning more about marketing. Have you tried any kind of marketing? Like, not have you tried any kind of marketing?
I
Obviously, you've
was
tried
like,
something. Like, of course. I'm just wondering if you found something that worked for you.
yeah. So one thing I did for Hope Writers that I've now done for myself is if people haven't opened my emails in quite a while, I will send them an email. And I did this once earlier this year, and I'll probably do it once every once in a while. If they haven't opened an email in maybe 6 months or something, being like, hey, do you want to stay subscribed? If so, here is an exclusive freebie
Oh, that's cool.
to give them a little bit of an incentive to actually open that email. And then if they
Engage. Yeah.
click to download, so it's a free short story that I'm not giving out other places. So if they click to download that, then they stay on the list. And if they don't click, then they're just not my ideal reader, which is
Right.
okay. But I
Mhm.
was getting up to the point where I was almost about, excuse me, I was almost about to have to start paying for my email service because I had that certain
And you
number
don't
of
wanna pay for dead
subscribers.
subscribers, right?
Right. If they're not engaged,
Right.
then I don't want to pay for them. So
No.
it
We
was
gotta
time
worry
to
about
clear
these
out the
things,
email
right?
list.
Yeah.
So I cleared it out. And that way you keep the more engaged subscribers who are
Well,
actually
and you
interested
bring
in
up
your
a
work.
really good point, right? Numbers, I know we can get really caught up in platform numbers, email list numbers, social media numbers, and, sometimes that number can make us feel really good, but if those people aren't engaging with us, it's it's not really doing us any good, it's just a number.
Right. Right. So, as far as getting new email subscribers, I have used book sweeps. I have used other group promotions, where you share the promotion with
Mhm.
your email list, and then other people do the same, and you can end up with new subscribers that way. I do have a freebie for my subscribers. It's a prequel novella to The Rhythms of Redemption. There's a food truck throughout the series, and so this is
That's fun.
about the food truck owner, and I
Oh,
wrote it
I
after
didn't
I
know that.
had
Now I'm
I
gonna have
wrote
to
it
go get it.
after I had written several of the books, but I had pretty much only described that food truck owner just a very little bit, and I said he hated drama. So it
Yeah.
was like, let's come up with this whole storyline where poor Asher, who hates drama, um, falls for one of the Warren twins, but not the one who has declared her feelings for him. So
Oh,
he's
no.
suddenly in the middle of this drama storm. And so that was
Awesome.
that was a lot of fun, and it was a fun way. Then I gave the heroine from book one some cameos in the story. And it was just kind of fun to build a little bit more on that story world. And that's my freebie now.
That's fun. That's really fun. Well, before we wrap up our time together, which I can't believe it's gone by so fast, as good conversations always do, but I wanted to ask you a couple more things. First of all, is there a tool or a resource that you think every fiction writer should have at their disposal?
I think it's feedback from people who are farther in the journey. And
Ooh, okay.
when I first came up with that idea, because I knew you were going to ask that question, I was thinking of like feedback on our manuscripts because that
Mhm.
was important to me. Early on, like I got feedback from critique partners, and that was very helpful. But after a point, I submitted to a contest, and then feedback from authors who were a little further down the line, like they came up with stuff that I was like, they are so right. Nobody else
Mm,
like saw this.
yeah.
So, and then eventually I hired an editor to look at my opening chapters, and that helped immensely. I think you get to a point, and I still have critique partners and I still appreciate them. And now I also pay for edits.
Yeah.
So I think there comes a time when that professional is necessary. But I've also learned a lot from contest judges. And
Mm,
so I think like you can get to a certain point where um, the critiques from your peers are still helpful, but there are things that people who are further down the line can see that you might not be hearing from anyone else. And that can be really valuable. And now that I'm looking at how to become better at indie publishing,
mhm.
learning feedback from people who are making a business of it, who do have that QIP badge,
Right. Yep.
those people have a lot that they can tell me that I'm not just going to stumble across on my own.
Right.
So learning that there's always more to learn from the people who are further ahead of me. So just really looking for those connections and taking advantage of, when you can ask questions and doing that.
That's really great. Really appreciate that. Do you have any last bit of advice for somebody who's trying to navigate all the things as a writer?
Yeah, just stay curious. I think
I love
every
that.
single writer, I mean, and anyone, we all have more that we can learn.
Mhm.
And we
Yep.
have to take it one step at a time. There's only so much we can do at once. But if we stay curious and keep growing, we're going to get there. And I believe God has a path for each of us, and He's going to lead us on that.
Mhm.
But staying curious is an important part of that, because if it's like, well, I tried it and it didn't work, or or I did it and it's fine. There's
Right.
just always more that we can grow. And so trying to stay curious and seeing it as staying curious rather than being like, oh, I did this wrong and I did that wrong. Like
Mm.
beating yourself
Yeah.
up is self-defeating too. So just treating it like something you're curious about.
Thank you for sharing that today. I really appreciate it. I think it'll be really helpful for aspiring writers who are just beginning this journey, and even those of us who are a little bit further along who are maybe in the thick of it and need just to be reminded that staying curious and not beat ourselves up for the moments where maybe things don't go exactly the way that we had hoped for. So I
Yeah.
do really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well, Emily, can you tell us a little bit about where we can find you, your work, what's coming up for you soon?
Sure. Well, I'm trying very hard to keep my website updated. So emilyconradauthor.com. You can find out all about my Rockstar series, The Rhythms of Redemption there. And my links to like social media and stuff, email sign up, stuff about
Everything's
that
there.
freebie. It's all should all be there. So that's probably the best one-stop shop.
And you have a book releasing. It might, by the time this episode comes out, it definitely will have already released. But can you tell us a little bit about it? Like, tell us where we can find it, where we can support
I was
you
ready
by
for this
by.
one. It's right
Yay!
here.
It's a gorgeous cover.
Yeah.
They're all very
It's with
beautiful.
the sunflowers, and
Yes.
I'm seeing my camera. It doesn't look like it's doing the colors justice. It
Oh
is on a
no,
black and white color cover. There are some pretty colors on
they
there,
are
some
gorgeous. It is.
pastels.
I can attest. I've seen it, and
Yeah.
it's beautiful.
But it's called To Believe in You. It is the fourth and final book in the Rhythms of Redemption. It is dealing with a character who burned some bridges early in the series. He is an addict, but he's a year into recovery when the story starts, and he has a lot of trust to win back, especially because I paired him with an heiress, a rule following heiress, right?
Oh my goodness.
She's kind of an undercover heir. She doesn't talk about it. She works for Ostruck. Um, she she was mentioned in a couple of the other books. Her
She's
name is
the social
Luna.
media manager for them,
She's
right?
their social media
Yeah.
manager, and she doesn't really talk about the fact that she inherited some money
Ooh,
from her
okay.
grandparents. But she was also burned in a past relationship. And so she has a very low trust threshold, and she's very suspicious of Matt. And I can see where she's coming from. And so she has some trouble with that, and he's a bit of a daredevil, and you know, we just let them work that out a little bit. We've got the more reserved, careful character who has kind of made her way in life by being careful. And then we've
Mm.
got Matt, who has made his share of mistakes, as we all do, but he's still trying to recover from that. So watching those two work that out was a lot of fun.
So it's the last one in the series.
Mm-hmm.
Are you
I've been sad.
sad?
Well,
Like that's coming to a
no.
close, or do you feel like it's not quite coming to like you're done with these four, but you have this other story, so it's not like
Right. I mean, so Tim gets to bridge the two series. And at one point in the series, there is a character who moves out of the area away from the others. And he also has a background role in the
okay,
new series. So he's kind of on, like, he'll be in the background of some of those stories too. So we get like things are still happening in the same world. You
okay.
know, they're still out there. But at the
Like
same
your favorite characters might come and visit, and
yeah, I mean, yeah. I I sometimes think about what these characters' future would look like, but it's like, well, that would be a whole nother book, and people would
mm,
be, like for now they've had their closure, and they've told the stories that
they
I
need to
wanted to
tell.
tell through them.
Yeah,
So it feels like a sense of closure, I think, more than anything. I've been working with these characters for 5 years now.
yeah.
So I know they all released very quickly, but for me, it's been longer. And yeah, they're still out there in the world. I still
Which
think
one's your
of them.
favorite? Which out of the four books, which one's your favorite?
That's a tricky question.
Oh, come on.
Book is the
I
book
love
I
Ellie.
fell in love with.
Okay.
Like that's the book that made me want to continue writing the
Yeah.
series.
Mm-hmm.
I think even as the series was going, I was learning a lot more about writing. And
Mm,
it's funny because even now I can think of things like, oh, I could do this differently, like in the future, even now that so I'm going to always be learning, but
yes.
I was able to apply a lot of the things that I learned by the time I got to book four,
Okay.
which I just finished writing like early this year. So to me, I was able to apply a lot of things I had learned, and I think that makes book four pretty strong. I've heard you can read it as a standalone. But I also think that if you go into it with some of the background of all the things that these characters have been through together, it kind of lends a little bit more context.
That makes
But
sense.
so I like all the lessons that have been applied, like that I've
Yeah,
learned by book 4. So
that's great. Well, thank you once again, Emily, for coming on the podcast today and sharing with us your journey and your words of wisdom. Really appreciate it.
for having me.
We'll meet back here next week to talk more about the business of Christian fiction. Bye.